Good afternoon, everyone, and a wonderful Erev Shabbat to you all. We are together for the Henry and Lisa Manoucheri Parsha Shiur. Our Magid Shiur, our guide, is Rabbi Akiva Zweig, Rosh Yeshiva at the Talmudic University of Florida. You can also catch a recording of the Shiur that will be posted afterwards, and it will also be on Spotify and YouTube. So look out for it on social media, share the recording, and share the links. Today, the rabbi is going to be discussing Parshas VaYiGash. The topics will be AI worship and the soul of our nation, plus Jewish international relations, all very pressing issues. The month of Teves is sponsored in honor of a beloved father and grandfather, Yidel Shoyovich, on his 60th birthday. Mazal Tov. They are grateful to mark this milestone, and may he be blessed with many more years. All his children and grandchildren wish him a year filled with continued spiritual growth, happiness, light, and good health. Amen. This week's class is dedicated for a Refu'ah Shalema for Perel Sasha, Bas Meril Rivka, Yehoshua ben Faiga Chaya, Shlomo ben Baila, and Moshe ben Simcha. Without further ado, Rabbi Zweig and Parshas VaYiGash.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good Erev Shabbos. Pleasure to be with you all. We are here to discuss the topics that Aaron Yehuda mentioned. I should also point out that we're just 1 week away from the conclusion of the book of Genesis of Sefer Bereshis. And as such, I think we really need to understand and look at the sentences in this week's Parsha as part of the theme of Genesis. And what's very interesting is that there's a huge amount of attention paid to a few years of famine in the land of Egypt. Famines come and famines go. And nonetheless, the Torah devotes approximately 20 plus sentences between last week's Parsha and this week's Parsha discussing what happened in a specific 2 years of the famine. Now, as Aaron Yehuda mentioned, we are going to discuss Jewish international relations and the worship of AI. And the bottom line is that I think more than ever, given all that happened in Australia and Bondi Beach and what's been happening since October 7th, the Jewish people need to develop a national identity that really speaks to not only Jewish interests, but that it also speaks to the actual makeup and fabric of who the Jewish people are today. One of the things that's very lacking is not only the concept of unity and Jews getting along with one another, but actually a clarified vision of what is the role of Jewish people in the world, and that Jewish people all know that role, and that they're all doing something to further that mission that the Jewish people have as a collective national entity. So, bearing all of this in mind, I want to point out the way the Torah presents this incredible story of Yosef revealing himself to the brothers, and ultimately the Torah describing the famine that occurred in Egypt in those years. So, as we know, the brothers came down the second time to obtain food from Yosef, who was the ruler of Egypt. And in the second trip down to Egypt, Yosef concocted a ruse whereby his precious goblet was hidden in the sack of his brother Binyamin. And then it was, quote unquote, found. And then Binyamin was on the hook to become a slave. And at the beginning of this week's portion, Yehuda lobbies on his behalf that he should not be a slave, but instead Yehuda should serve instead of him. When Yosef witnesses Yehuda's eloquent display and pleading on behalf of Binyamin, Yosef decides it's time to reveal that I am Yosef, and is my father still alive? And the rest of the story unfolds with the brothers speaking to Joseph and eventually going back to Egypt, going back to Canaan, to their father, and telling him that Joseph is alive, and everybody moves down to Egypt. Okay, now, something that we pointed out on Wednesday is that it's kind of astonishing that the brothers have been living in Israel with their father for 30 years, and they make no qualms, they make no protestations over the fact that Joseph is asking them to move down, and maybe this is something they should speak about either with their wives or with their children or with their father Yaakov, and immediately everybody moves down. And it's important, if you have the chance, to listen to that class because it's going to dovetail with what we're discussing here today. After everybody comes down, the Torah then says that Yehuda was sent to seek out land and teaching in Goshen in front of everybody coming down. So in other words, the Torah says everybody came down, but then the Torah says that what happened before that is that Yehuda was sent to kind of pave the way for how they would settle there. When the Torah mentions all the names of the descendants of Yaakov that would come down to Egypt, the Torah is very careful to use the word soul, S-O-U-L, like we spoke about in the title, the soul of our nation. The Torah uses the Hebrew word nefesh. Nefesh means soul. And therefore, the Torah is telling us that these people that came down are all souls, S-O-U-L. The Torah repeats that word several times. Let's say once, twice, 3, 4, maybe 5 times. And then again in Exodus, when the Torah tells us at the beginning of the Exodus story that Jacob came down, he came down with 70 souls. The 70 souls that emerged from him. So the question is, what is the significance of this word soul? And why is it here being injected as the way to describe these 66 people that came down, plus the 3 that were in Egypt, plus the one that was born between the walls, whose name was Yocheved, altogether 70? Why is that the word that the Torah is emphasizing when it's describing these 70 people that came down? The Torah could have just as easily left out that word. We would know that we're referring to people. We would know that it's the number 70. So it's a very interesting thing that the Torah wants us to think of these people as souls. And in fact, the last sentence that concludes the listing of all the people that came down includes the children of Joseph. And it says the children of Joseph that were born to him in Egypt were 2 souls. All the souls of the house of Jacob that came to Egypt were 70. Very interesting sentence. And then the Torah says Yehuda was sent in front of him to kind of carve out or pave the way both for settling and for teaching. According to the rabbis, he established a yeshiva of learning. From there would emerge all the rulings of the Torah. Okay, so that's question number 1. What's the emphasis of souls? Question number 2 is that almost all of the commentaries, Seforno is a kind of a radical exception in this case, almost all of the commentaries that look at our Parsha and the way the Torah describes the brothers coming down to Egypt and then ultimately standing in front of the Pharaoh, where they discuss, what are their occupations, and there's a very special attention and specific wording that Yosef wants the brothers to present. He wants them to tell Pharaoh that they are shepherds. That's what Yosef wants them to present as their occupation, so that they should be entitled to settle in the land of Goshen. We're going to come back and discuss this in a moment. And then it says that everybody settled. Yosef settled his brothers, and he continued to support them the years of the famine, everything that they needed. Now, it's important to note that in the Torah, we sometimes have separations. We sometimes have pauses, breaks in the Torah that's represented by empty spaces. Over here, the Torah simply says that the brothers visited Paro, Jacob also, the father also visited Paro, and in fact, Jacob blessed them, right? And then the Torah says that Yosef settled everybody, and without any break whatsoever, with no paragraph indicator, no idea that we're deviating from any kind of flow of the sentences, the Torah then says, and there was no bread in all the land. This is chapter 47, sentence 13. There was no bread anywhere in the land because the famine was very heavy. and the entire Egypt was weary. They were worn out from the famine. And Joseph gathered all of the money, all of the silver that was to be found in Egypt. Because of the food that everyone was buying, they were giving all of their money, all of their silver. And Joseph brought all of it to the house of the Pharaoh, in other words, to the national treasury. And then all of the money was depleted. There was no money left for the people. And all of Egypt came and they said, give us bread. Why should we die? And Joseph said, look, okay, give me your cattle. You don't have any money? Give me your cattle. And I'll give you food in exchange for your cattle. So they brought all their cattle. And all of Egypt was emptied from all of their cattle in that year. And the Torah says that was the end of that year. All of the money, silver, all of the cattle, everything was gone in exchange for the food. And then they came again in the second year to Joseph and they said, listen, everything is finished. Why should we die? Buy us as your slaves, and we and our land will be slaves to Pharaoh, and give us seed so that eventually we'll be able to grow crops. In other words, give us sustenance and the ability to plant again so that we should be able to grow food for ourselves, for the land. And then the Torah says how Joseph actually took people throughout the land and he purchased all the land from the people. And basically the government of Egypt owned the land, owned the people, and everything was part of the national treasure house, so to speak, of Pharaoh, except for the Kohanim, except for the priests, that Joseph didn't get involved in their land and didn't buy them. Okay, now, again, all of this is being described after the brothers and all the souls came down, and Yehuda, figured out the way to settle, and the yeshiva, etc. And Yosef presented his brothers and his father to Pharaoh. And now we're talking about these 2 years of the famine. So Rashi says that the Torah is going back in time. The Torah is telling us that all of this happened, but before all of that happened, all of the depletion of the money and the animals of Egypt that occurred was before the brothers moved down, because that was really the first 2 years of the famine. And that's the way the majority of our commentators, including the rabbis, the early rabbis of the Talmud, that's the way they all understand the Torah is out of order in this regard, that really those 2 years that are being described at the end of the Parsha, those 2 years of the famine, that really happened before this whole revealing of Joseph's identity and the brothers moving down and Jacob coming down and presenting themselves in their occupations in front of Pharaoh. All of what the Torah is describing at the end of our Parsha really happened before the rest of our Parsha. And obviously the question is, why would the Torah do that? Why put all of this information about the famine, and as we mentioned in our introduction, so much attention is being paid to these first 2 years, why put all of that information out of order? But that is the way practically all of our commentaries learn. The Sephorno has a different explanation. We're not going to get to that today, but you should know that in case you want to look it up. He says that it's actually talking about year 6 and year 7 of the famine, but all of the early rabbis, including Rashi and many other commentaries, say that it's referring to first 2 years of the famine, and we have to deal with the problem that it's out of order. But in addition to dealing with that problem, that these are all out of order, we have one other very fascinating sentence, which is the last sentence of our portion. And it says that the Jewish people lived in Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they took hold in it, and they were fruitful and multiplied very much. So here's the problem. First, we have that it's out of order because really these 2 years that the Torah is describing happened before the brothers came down. But then in the very last sentence, the Torah seems to be jumping past the 2 years, past the fact that the brothers came down and presented themselves and settled in Goshen, and now they're being fruitful and multiplying. So it's just a wacky presentation of events. Either we should mention the 2 years in order, and then we could talk about the brothers moving down, settling in Egypt, and they were fruitful and they multiplied. that would have been a really good option. The Torah chose not to do that. Or if you want to tell me that the Torah is doing it out of order, so say, okay, the brothers came down, they presented their occupations, and they were fruitful and multiplied to hold in the land, finish, end that, and then you want to go back to the last 2 years of the famine. But how can we possibly explain that not only is the Torah out of order in terms of these 2 years of the famine, which really took place before the brothers came down and before they settled in Egypt, but at the very end of that description, we're then going to conclude with, hey, and the Jewish people were fruitful and multiplying, took hold in the land of Egypt, which is jumping back to after they came down, after they settled, after they dealt with Paro and were able to live in the land of Goshen. So those are really the questions that we're going to deal with. I'm just going to mention one last point, that it's quite interesting that Yosef is orchestrating that as a nation, they should live in a separate land called the land of Goshen, which we really know nothing about until our Parsha, that they're going to settle in Goshen. And Yosef says in his message to his father that he hasn't seen in 22 years, he says, listen, you're going to come down and you'll be close to me. Not that you'll live with me, you'll be close to me because you're going to be in Goshen. And Joseph obviously has to be closer to the main cities of Egypt, but you'll be in Goshen. And by the way, we're going to make sure to orchestrate that you're going to be able to stay there. And that's what he does later. But when the Torah describes how they lived in Egypt, it says, and they lived in Goshen. They lived in Egypt in the land of Goshen. Which is it? In the land of Egypt or in the land of Goshen? Like, what is going on here with these two locations? And if you tell me that they're really living in Goshen, why are you saying that they live in Egypt? You want to say that, okay, it's technically the country of Egypt? You don't need to repeat that here at the end of the Parsha. So what I'd like to do is begin with one final question that is a subject that we mentioned in passing a couple minutes ago, and now we need to go into it deeply. The men were shepherds, and as Rabbi Yechiel points out on our chat, that was their occupation. They were shepherds, as the Torah tells us earlier in Parshas VaYiGash. Okay, and Yosef says to his brothers, listen, I'm going to go to Pharaoh, and I'm going to tell them, my brothers, my father's household came from Canaan to me, and the men are shepherds because they have cattle. And all of their sheep and all of their cattle they brought with them. And therefore, when Paro says to you, what do? Tell them that you have cattle and that you are shepherds in order that you should live in Egypt. So this is chapter 46, sentence 34. And you should say that the men are men of cattle, meaning this is what Yosef is saying the brothers of Israel said. We are people of cattle from our youth until now. We and our fathers, in order that you should settle in the land of Goshen. Why? Because it is an abomination of Egypt, anyone who shepherds sheep. Like a really strange concept. Anybody who's a shepherd is an abomination. What does that mean? Because you're a shepherd, so there's something wrong with you? You want to say it's a low-class job? There are plenty of low-class jobs. It's like you're a garbage collector because you're a shepherd. What does it mean that anybody who's a shepherd is an abomination of Egypt? So today we're going to discuss Rashi's explanation of that phrase. And what Rashi says is that anybody who was a shepherd was an abomination to Egypt. They were despised because sheep were gods. They were idols of Egyptians. So therefore, anybody who was a shepherd is considered to be off the reservation, and they are not allowed close to the rest of the population. They're distanced from the rest of the population, right? Anything that's abominable, you distance from yourself. That's what Rashi says. And honestly, I have to share with you, I don't understand that explanation. I'm trying to really understand this. The people who take care of the cows of India, for example, they're abominable people. They're taking care of their idols. So the Jews who are shepherds are abominable people because they take care of the sheep. Somebody has to take care of the sheep. Now, if you want to say that they're abominable because they take care of their sheep and then they slaughter them and eat them for supper, okay. But that's not what it says. It just says anyone who's a shepherd is considered to be an abomination. Why? Doesn't somebody need to take care of these sheep? You have people worshiping sheep and nobody's taking care of the sheep. So what does it mean that they're abominable? You need them. I would have thought that those people are priests, right? They're serving their God. They're caring for their God. They're shepherding them. They're making sure that they don't get sick, or if they get sick, that they get healthy, or that they have food, or they're treating them with the greatest respect and care. What is the simple explanation of this sentence? You should live in the land of Goshen because anybody who's a shepherd is considered to be abominable to Egypt, and Rashi says because they worship sheep. It would seem to be the opposite. So what I'd like to suggest, and this is where we get into the subject of worshiping AI. The nations of the world, that means the people of the world that do not want to recognize a God, obviously, thank God, no pun intended, they are um, um, they are God worshiping. I don't refer to people who actually recognize the one God. I'm talking about the rest of the people. And the point is that what the people who worship technology, AI, money, what they're really interested in is the power and the wealth and the ease of life and luxury that they can live by taking advantage of all of these new technologies and all of these more, so to speak, comfortable ways of living and getting things done, which is what technology and AI provide. What they don't really want, they don't really want to know that really it's an invention of people, and that the people who invented it are the people who can best manipulate it, and that they are the people that can rig it, and they are the people that can really take the most advantage of it. They don't really want to know that. They don't really want to know how the magic happens. It's kind of like, people who go to see magic shows. Do you want to see how it's all done? You'd rather have that thrill of belief that it really is magical. It really is something, beyond, normal understanding. It's something spiritual or something, that is just super special and mysterious. And so my suggestion is that the people of Egypt wanted to distance themselves from the shepherds because they don't want to know that sheep get sick and die. They're their gods. They don't want to know what it takes to take care of the sheep so that they don't get sick or so that they have enough to eat when, it's cold outside and food is scarce. They don't want to know about any of that. They just want the illusion of their idols. And that's what many, many people want in very secular cultures. And so people are rushing to the AI craze, right? With the newest AI, and it's going to have a consciousness of its own. It's going to have a life of its own, right? That's the way people are literally thinking of AI, which is totally man made. Everything about it. It's man made in terms of the technology of how it operates, in terms of the large language models that it's programmed to analyze. Everything about it is man-made, and including that all the ideas came from other people and it's just being gathered and being regurgitated back to you. All of that is man-made, but that takes all the fun and games and mystery out of it. People don't really want to know that. They would like to believe that it's something more ethereal, something more mysterious, and something that they're somehow able to take advantage of and get wealthy from and figure out other things that will give them other kinds of benefits or strategic ways to overcome their challenges or other people, etc. But that's not what it is. It's really just a man-made thing. And there are people that write the programs, that analyze it, that understand what it's really doing. And even though there's, definitely a lot to understand and it's super complex, it's something well within the boundaries of human intellectual grasping. But it's more fun to worship it as an idol. And it's more fun to think of it as the next great wealth generator. But that's not the truth. So what the Torah is telling us here is that Yosef wants his brothers, because of who they are, to not be part of the mainstream Egyptian culture, and for Egypt to say, listen, you guys do your own thing, no problem. Go for it. You do your own thing. And if it means tending to our idols, okay, great. We don't really want to see that. We don't really want to know from it. And it's perfectly okay for you to play that role. And that's what Yosef says is the best role for the Jewish people. Because the best role for the Jewish people is to be the engineers that are working under the hood, not the ones that are gaining all the limelight, not the ones that are looking like they are getting super, super wealthy or manipulating society into gaining their wealth. No, the best thing is, okay, you guys, you want to take care of the back end stuff, no problem. We'll get all the wealth. And that's what Egypt really wants. They'll worship their sheep, they'll worship their idols, they'll think somehow these idols are the secret of their agrarian success or the secret of why somehow, they were blessed to have the man who would know how to save all the food and to get the money from all the countries around them, and that then that money will eventually become good for Egypt and everybody will get back the land, and then they're just going to pay a 20% tax, which is how Yosef orchestrates the whole thing. But the real message is, what is the correct role of the Jew in international relations? So if you want to think of a modern day example, Jared Kushner is not bad. Anybody have a title for Jared Kushner? Like, what's his role in the government?
Reish
He's
Galusa.
Race Galusa, okay. He's in the back room
President son-in-law.
doing, what was that?
Facilitator.
President son-in-law.
Okay, president son-in-law. He doesn't have an official role in the government. Is he in Mar-a-Lago? Is he in Miami Beach somewhere? Does he go to the shul, the Young Israel Bal Harbor? The point is that the best role for the Jews in the international community is an unofficial role. That's really the best role. And Yosef is orchestrating that 100% proactively and very carefully, very strategically. And what the Torah is really saying is that you could have a tremendous economy with incredible wealth, and the role of the Jew is to not be in the limelight. Now, we've spoken in the past about Yosef himself. Yosef is obviously somewhat in the limelight, right? But even he himself is taken a very subservient role to Paro. He takes nothing for himself. He empowers everyone else. And when it comes to the national identity of the Jewish people, you guys are in Goshen. You guys are shepherds. Yes, the Egyptians worship gods. That's fine. They don't want to know from the people who make their gods, actually function and tick. They don't actually want anybody to know about that. So Sean is asking a great question. We'll get to that in a couple minutes. Sean, if you could stick around at the end, I'd love to get to that question, okay, about King David and his identity, etc. But when it comes to the role of the Jew in foreign countries, in the international relations component, where you're literally presenting the Jews in front of Pharaoh. And what do? The answer is, they develop startup companies and technology, and they can make everyone else wealthy. And when they figure it all out, you can benefit from that. But let them do their thing, and you guys can take all of the glory. And that's exactly what Yosef fashions. Now, once we understand that, we have to ask ourselves the following question. A, what is it about the Jews that make themselves capable of really getting to this kind of wisdom that figures out what's behind what drives an economy, what's behind what other people worship? I could give you so many examples, as in, for example, owners of sports teams and sports agents, as opposed to the people who are actually working in the sports, right? The advertising and the companies that own the advertising, the companies that own the networks, et cetera, et cetera. We could give tons and tons of examples. The point is that as far as being able to pursue a role among the nations of the world that helps to facilitate the economies of the world in a very real way, and to use the intelligence of the the tradition of the Torah of our ancestry for the sake of what's good for the world, we have to recognize that the Jewish soul has an international importance. And that's why the Torah is emphasizing the word soul. These are the 70 that come down to Egypt, and the number 70, is the number of nations in the world. And we have to understand that Jews, by their very essence, are not an isolationist group. They are not a nation that's meant to stay alone and be unto themselves. No. They are a nation that's meant to facilitate the true efficacy of the other nations. So even though the Torah says, "Behold, you are a nation that will dwell alone," in Parshas VaYiGash, you are a nation that will dwell alone. That's because in order to be the soul of the nation that we have and that we are, we have to orchestrate together, we have to work together, we have to function together, we have to be synergistic with one another. But when we do that, then we absolutely have a relevance on the international stage. And so what Ari just asked, is this role for Golos? No, this role is for all time. This is why on the holiday of Sukkot, we bring 70 offerings corresponding to the nations of the world, because our role is to facilitate the efficacy of the other nations. And in fact, we mentioned a few years ago that the rabbis say over here, Yehuda went in front to facilitate how they would live in the yeshiva. The yeshiva is the place where wisdom is supposed to go to the whole world. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah is to the whole world. Misham teitzei Horah, from the yeshiva is supposed to go to the teaching. That's supposed to be the whole world. But that's only when the Jews see themselves as a soul that has a role in the entire world. Only if you understand that part of the Jewish identity is to benefit the whole world and to bring proper economy, proper wisdom, proper orchestration to the whole world, just like Yosef himself does, right? Only if you see our national role as that, do we then become the proper facilitators of what's good for the entire world. And that's exactly what Yosef is orchestrating here. And let's understand that he is successful. I'm talking about Joseph right now, is successful in accomplishing this for the land of Egypt for a full 80 years. 9 years before the brothers come down and 71 years after. 71 years after the brothers come down. The Jews are living in Goshen. The Jews are taking care of the idols of Egypt, and nobody has any problems with them. And the nation of Egypt is super wealthy, the superpower of the time. The economy is phenomenal, and everyone is happy. Literally everyone is happy, all until the anti-Semitism begins in the beginning of Shemos, which we'll talk about, and that has to do with what we spoke about last week. The Jews themselves forgot their identity, etc. But if you understand that the soul of the nation is the soul of the world, that means to help the whole world succeed, then we take our rightful place and we create wisdom and technology, everything else that maybe the nations of the world even worship. Of course, we're not doing it so that they should worship it. We are doing it so that it can succeed. And it all works beautifully. It all works perfectly. But you need to understand that what God is always, always guiding, what he's always shaping, is for the Jews to take that role. The reason that there's a famine in Egypt is so that the Jews find their soul, and so that the Jews self-identify that they need to be their own autonomous group. Autonomous doesn't mean that they don't get anything from Egypt, but that they need to function as a unit with its own purpose, like in the land of Goshen. And that's why world events happen the way that they do. Because the Jews need to find that identity, because God wants what's good for the entire world. And what Yosef is specifically orchestrating is, there was a famine. They came down. First, he is working on the brothers' understanding of their own unity and how they need each other, and how Binyamin is important and how the father is important. These are all things I've spoken about in the last several weeks in various classes in great depth. And I recommend that if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and do them. But that's to create the inner nation. But in this week's Parsha, in addition to the inner nation, which Yosef helped form, is now he's stamping them with their national identity, that they understand that they are a group that needs to work together, even to take care, so to speak, of the AI technology or of the God of the times of the people. And they need that separation so that they can be who they are. And great, that'll provide the economy for the rest of the world. Beautiful, wonderful. We love that. No problem. And then the Torah is saying that everything that happened was for that reason. And that's why the Torah puts it in the order that it does. And the Torah is telling us that by first telling you that there's a famine and that the brothers come down and they have that whole discovery of Yosef as Yosef reveals himself in the Parsha, and they become comfortable with it and they all move down. And as we explained on Wednesday, they move down because they know this is the best way for them to possibly synergize and function. They become this nation that's capable of being the 70, the nation that will provide everything that the rest of the world needs, and they don't need any credit for it. Then the Torah tells you that's the whole reason that the Egypt was wiped out. That's the whole reason why Egypt was then able to organize itself after the people sold everything to the government, but because Yosef was able to orchestrate that the government should own everything, then give them back their land, and then everybody becomes relatively free people, but they owe a 20% tax. Torah is telling you that's why all of that happened, because the facilitation was to enable the Jewish people to take their role, help the rest of the world, and now you have a beautifully flourishing economy for 71 years, and everybody's quote unquote happy. But more importantly, the Torah tells you that when the Jews take that role, you know what happens? Wherever they are in the world, that's the last sentence of the Parsha, they settle, they take hold in the land, and they're fruitful, and they multiply very much. And if you want to know if it's going to last in Egypt or in the rest of the Western world, it completely depends on the Jewish people organizing themselves, unifying, recognize their role as the soul of the world by recognizing that they represent all the nations of the world, that they have a huge important role to play on the international stage, but only if they unify and if they work together and if they know their identity and if they're doing everything that they can to facilitate what's good for the rest of the world without needing to be in the limelight, without needing to be superior, without needing to claim privilege or anything else. If they understand that that's their role in the world, they will be fruitful and multiply and settle and take hold in whatever land that they are. Now, ultimately, of course, that's going to be in Eretz Yisrael as the main place. We're not going to go more into that today, but what is important to go into today is that whenever we get hints of the government of Israel or any national politicking body that is trying to assert Jewish uniqueness to either be like all of the other nations or that they have claims of superiority, that is completely off mission, that is completely counterproductive, and it is not the soul of our nation. The only thing that we should be claiming, which we also claim sometimes correctly, is that we're here to make sure that the world is a better place for the world. That's the only thing we should be making claim to. And so saying that getting rid of terrorists is getting rid of the threats to all of civilized mankind, that's perfectly good. But saying that Israel has as much right to exist as any other nation in the world, that's bad. That's bad. We have to take our responsibility. We have to take our role. I'm not saying it's not true, but that's not really our identity. Our identity is to say that we're here to help the entire world. Yes, we're going to develop technology. Use it for the good people of the world. Yes, we're going to innovate many, many things, many, many ideas, many, many philosophies in the arts, in everything, but it's for the sake of all the good people of the world. That's what it means that we are a nation of 70. which is the number that the Torah is talking about, and that's our true national identity. So I'm suggesting that the word nefesh, which means soul, is the reason to live. It's not just soul as having the spirit or having spirituality. It's as in passion, as in mission, as in the reason to exist. The soul of the Jewish people are 70 because they represent the souls of all the nations, and we have to help all the other nations be everything that they can be. That's our mission. Now, I happen to know that Bibi Netanyahu and his wife are coming to South Florida this week, and perhaps I'll even have a chance to spend time. And what we need all Jewish leaders to know is that first and foremost, of course, is our relationship with Hashem, and that Hashem is devising everything so that the Jewish nation can be who it's supposed to be. That's first and foremost. But second is that who we are supposed to be, everybody talks about a light unto the nations. We're supposed to be the life of the nations. We're supposed to help everyone be able to live and succeed, and ultimately, of course, recognize Hashem and see the wisdom of the Torah, 100%. But that means that we have to stop thinking in terms of our right to exist. It's not about our right to exist. It's about the world's need for the Jews to exist, because we're living for them. Just like we're living to have a relationship with Hashem, we're living to make the world better for everyone. And if we recognize that that's the way Hashem orchestrates all of the events of history, then hopefully we can live up to that. Now, I'd like to get to Sean's question, and then we will get to everyone else's question in a moment. So, Sean, your question was, what about King David? Was King David not kind of in the limelight? Yes, the answer was that King David was very much in the limelight. So when we live in the land of Israel, and when we have a holy temple that is recognizable as the seat of the throne of Hashem, so then we take the rightful place as the power of the world that is organizing the world properly, because we actually have the jurisdiction to organize them. And that's great. But short of that, we don't have that ability, we don't have that role, we don't have that power, authority is the word I'm looking for, because we're not in our rightful place, and we don't have the Mashiach today. And so God's presence is not fully present. But when God's presence is fully present, okay, yes, then we become the clear ambassadors and the clear governors of the world. But just know that King David himself, his ultimate definition is servant of God. He is the ultimate servant of God. So it's not about power, but unless God himself is very present, and that the Jewish people can be seen as the ambassadors of God himself, we have to be very careful that we're not coming across like we're taking authority or we're taking power. No, we're not. We're facilitating everyone else. And even when we take power, it's only because it's really God taking power, and then we're just, kind of the governor like Joseph himself was. Aaron Yehuda, please.
Okay, everyone. There's a react icon at the bottom of your screen. So if you want to say something, please use the raise hand button. And if you can't find it, then raise your actual hand and we'll try to see you if you're on video. In the meantime, I did notice that Ari Marinelli made a couple of references to whether
Please.
we should be more in the background as influencers rather than in the forefront, where he didn't say it, but I presume his concern is that we get in trouble and we're held responsible for things that would go wrong in the front. So should we be in the background in a supporting role?
Yeah, no, so that's a great question. Like, it's ever since the Stefanik inquiry, where everything depended on the context. I'm kind of loath to say it depends on the context. I see we have Dr. Patterson. I think he agrees with me. The truth is that many things depend on the context. Good and evil don't really depend so much on the context. So, the what role of leadership and how much in the limelight or how much in the background we are, I think does very much depend on the context. I happen to think a really good example for us is Jared Kushner. He very much kept himself in the background as much as he took a kind of a front role in negotiations, and everybody knew at different points that he was involved. If you'll notice, since the first term of the president, he became much more in the background, but then when it became more necessary, he, kind of got out of the background, but he's doing a lot of the background strategizing for sure. And I think that that's the answer. The answer is it really does depend on the situation. But most importantly, I think, Ari, for your question, is that when it comes to the state of Israel and the leaders, right, the recognizable heads of state, we need extreme, and I mean extreme humility and an extreme display of what we're doing is for the sake of civilized man. That's what we're trying to accomplish. Not that we have the technology, we have the power, we're going to get them. No. Whatever we're doing, yes, we need to protect our existence, fine. But the reason our existence is important is because the world actually needs the Jews that are going to fight against the evil and be on the front lines, like sometimes is said.
Okay.
Were you also making another point that it's not only about my involvement in the good, but it should be the good itself. And that's kind of the message of to walk humbly before Hashem, that it becomes about the mitzvah, the influence that we're having on the world in a positive way, and not so much about our being recognized for that.
Yes, I think that's true too. Was I making that point? Okay, so Ari's point is that we can also do good for the sake of good without being recognized for the good that we're doing, right?
Yeah, I was wondering if that, because it sounded like you were saying that this is a value statement that would apply for all time, even if we were in complete power. Not, so if you're thinking of it in terms of a utilitarian perspective, okay, so while we are not at the leadership of the world and we have to rely on the world and what the world has to offer, we don't have a choice but to kind of be part of the world because the world needs us, but it's probably in our best interest to be in the background. But then there's maybe a secondary or primary point that our involvement in the world really should be about the world itself and impacting the world, and not so much that we're the ones who are the ones orchestrating it.
Agreed. But when we are asked what is our role and what is our place, it should be that we're orchestrating and trying to facilitate as much good as we can.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes, agreed.
And that's why we're doing it.
Yes, 100%. Yes. And
I
we have
see,
a responsibility, yes.
Pardon, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. I see Noah's hand is upraised when you're ready.
Awesome.
Sure, thanks.
Point that Sean said, the motivation should be love, not ego. Yeah, giving. Motivation should be giving and empowering, not ego, 100%. Yes. Yes, Noah, please.
Question about the role of preference from the perspective of the father as opposed to the kid. Because obviously we know that nobody likes to be not preferred. So this is what, drove Cain to evil. This is, I guess, what drove the brothers to sell Yosef into slavery. And obviously they had time to repent and feel bad about that and did. But what's interesting is that Jacob doesn't seem to have changed his attitude at all. Like even after Yosef disappears, he still speaks similarly to the other brothers about Benjamin and makes it kind of clear that he's worth more than the others, or at least it seems that way from the text. And I'm kind of wondering, is that intentional? Is that a good thing? Is that appropriate? Or is that a failing that he has? And it almost kind of relates to why did God set us up this way?
Yeah, that's true. All excellent points. I did speak about that question extensively on Wednesday. And I said that statement that Jacob makes to his sons, hey, you know that my wife gave birth to 2 kids. And one of them is lost, and I said he was torn up. And now you take this one, I'm going to go down to a bad, evil grave. Sounds like the height of absolute favoritism and discarding, the rest of the brothers. So I spoke about that on Wednesday, and it's a great question. So very briefly, but I recommend that you go back and listen to that. It's in a transcript form also. If anybody wants to be added to the Wednesday class, let me know. But what I said is that there is a truth that a father can only be a father with his wife and with his kids, and that in order for Jacob to be the father to all of them, he needed his wife Rachel or her children, because that's his personal identity. And that's not a question of favoritism or nepotism. That's actually the only way that he could properly function as a father to all of them, because he actually loves and wants to empower all of them. So when it comes to your application of that principle to us Jewish people, it's a similar concept. And this is what happened in 2017 in the Oxford delivery address that I gave there, when I was asked, but what about the chosen nation concept? If you're really just here to help the other nations, what does it mean the Jews are chosen nation? We're chosen to help everybody know that they are meant to have a relationship with God. And we took that responsibility upon ourselves. Nobody else did. And so, oh well, we're stuck with that job, and nobody likes us for it. They actually hate us for it. But okay, we accept that as part of our mission and a part of our responsibility. And that's not about superiority, that's about responsibility.
This morning in Rav Yochanan's Shiur, your father, there was a discussion about how we are family, and it just came up how we are reminded how we will trade 1,000 terrorists for one Jew in the Gilad Shalit trade. Maybe I don't remember the exact numbers, and also how now there seemed to be no hesitation for people to shed blood and run through fire in order to save the hostages. And nobody said, why should we sacrifice so many people and go to war over so few people that were captured? We can't save them. We can't do this. There's no point. So I think it's a hopeful sign that what you're saying is true, and that we do need everybody with us as a family, just like Moshe wouldn't leave Mitzrayim and leave anybody behind. And it's a hopeful sign that we're still together as a nation, although there are all these fissures on the surface.
Yeah, so I want to get to your point about the value of every Jew, and I also want to get to Sean's point, which he's asking a very good question, is if we do feel that we're coming from a healthy place, and we do feel that we are able to really be in it for the right reasons, and that our mission is at the forefront rather than in the background, should we take that role? So I want to get to that question in a moment. Sean, let's hear Dr. Patterson, and then we'll get to that.
Thank you, Rabbi. You said a mouthful. There's so many things here. Yes, as far as chosen, the Jews are chosen for the thankless and perilous task of saying to humanity, every human being is chosen, summoned to a task with an infinite responsibility that no other can perform. Every soul is indispensable to all of creation. And that's a dangerous message to have to, deliver, as we see. With regard to, forgive me for being a little all over the place, but with regard to national identity, very important, absolutely. But we're not just a nation. We're not just a Goy Yisrael. We're Am Yisrael. It's not exactly the same. We're not exactly a nation among the rest of the nations. And just witness the UN. That tells you a lot. The use of the word nefesh. I mean, nefesh in the 5 levels of the soul is associated with malchus. It's the flesh and blood dimension of the soul. The body doesn't have a soul. The soul has a body. And we're here to address hunger. We're here to address flesh and blood concerns in concrete creation. So our involvement with the good here is also, as Ari mentioned, is the good's involvement with us. We don't choose the good. The good chooses us. The good is asking us, where is your brother and what have you done? And here we see Yehuda, kind of the mirror image of Cain. He's there laying his life on the line for his brother, right? The first commandment, be fruitful and multiply. Here we are being fruitful and multiplying. The break in the chronological order, I think, reminds me of creating the heavens before the earth, establishing a dimension of meaning so that we can understand the rest of it, a dimension of height. So this Parsha, in some ways, takes us back to the beginning of Torah, being a shepherd. And as shepherds, we are the shepherds of meaning. And meaning is an abomination to the Egyptians because meaning coming from Hashem. Hashem is an abomination. I mean, Pharaoh later will say, "Who's that? I don't know who you're talking about." Right.
Yeah.
AI is artificial.
Exactly.
It's steeped in artifice, which in artifice belongs to the official. You can't be an official without engaging in artifice. So the Jews are, I mean, Abraham is the original idol smasher, right? His father's shop. And the Jews, my last thought, scattered, forgive me, is, the Jews' entry into Egypt is really their first big foray among the nations, into the nations. They are a people apart in Goshen, right? The Jews are the ones who take the witness stand to engage in a testimony that, as you mentioned, many people don't want to hear and they hate us for it. But that's the light and the life. It's a testimony concerning what is meaningful, what matters. We're here to tell you that this AI is dangerous. It leads us into everything that doesn't matter, into death and darkness, ultimately. So there, again, I'm sorry to be so scattered, but there's so much going on with this part.
Yeah, it's great.
So I don't know, just a few of my disconnected thoughts, but they are actually connected.
Yes, they are definitely. Yeah, so I love your idea about taking the meaning, establishing that there is meaning before you look, at kind of what unfolds, the heaven before the earth. And I do think that, the first foray into international relations definitely is, the Jews presenting as a whole nation in the land of Egypt. And this is where the Torah says that the Jewish people, Yisrael, flourished and increased in the land. And, that really dovetails with Sean's point is, okay, so this is like their first entry point. Joseph is very much in the forefront, and he's positioning the brothers in the background in Goshen. So what's the right role? And what if a person really feels that role is in the forefront?
Yes, Joseph is one of the 7 shepherds.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's associated with Malchus, right? With
Yes.
this realm.
Yes, definitely. So I would suggest, Sean, that it does depend a lot on if a person is being called into that role, number one. Number two, as you pointed out, what is their real motivation, right? Are they really approaching it from an ego-less place? But also, they need to see themselves still, even if they are in the forefront, very, very, very much as facilitators and not as power takers. And that's what Joseph does. Every step that Joseph makes is really the money is for Egypt, the land is for Egypt, the people is for Egypt. Pharaoh is the king, right? He's not at all asserting himself as a power that should either be worshipped or either be, have revered and have awe from. Obviously, he needs to be in charge, and he is in charge, but he doesn't take it as a personal power trip at all. And he ultimately empowers Egypt.
And just one more thing, he is Yosef HaIvri.
Yes, yes, he is. He has an identity as a Hebrew, which is also interestingly different than an Israeli. or a Jew. So that's a subject for another time. But it's not like he's hiding his identity, but he's very much not looking for himself or for his glory or money or power. He's doing the opposite of that. So if a person is called into the forefront and they can do all of that, as opposed to, as we all know, right? How many people talk about how wealthy the Bidens became, how wealthy the Clintons, became, how wealthy the Trumps are becoming. That's what everybody's talking about, right? So forgetting about the politics and forgetting about, if they are doing good or not doing good, or it's good for the country or bad for the country, they're also taking care of themselves and their families. That cannot be from a Jew in charge. It's one thing to survive a famine, but it's a whole different thing to be becoming wealthy in that position. Does that answer your question, Sean? You're still there. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, no, awesome. Okay, great. Great. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments?
I just feel that what Yosef went through with his brothers of selling him, and they went through, he was working in the nation, and he saw what they're capable of. That's what put him into the position where he was, to understand what his role is in the Yiddish nation and in the Goyish nation.
Yes,
If
very
you
good.
realize that's God prepared him. His brothers were able to sell him, and if you ever it's very dangerous what I'm going to say, but at the end of the day, there was a sorry gemalchus. But at the end of the day, Yosef never forgave his brothers. He said, God sent me here. I love you guys, everything, but they never said muchala.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I don't know if it's dangerous. I don't agree.
I heard that from Moshe Feinstein once, that he wants to ask two partners to apologize to each other, and they asked him why. So he said, "This is what I just said." He told them that the brothers never asked him, "Please forgive us."
I agree with that.
Yeah, and that's why the Surrey.
Okay, but that's different than saying Yosef didn't agree, forgive them.
Well, if it doesn't sound like that he did.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay. I told you it's dangerous, but if you look into the Torah, he said, "God sent me here. God sent me here. I was here to feed you guys. I was here to be nice to you." And they went through the bar and they got scared. And then they even had to make a story that God said you should forgive us, but he didn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't say I forgave you. So that's why I say he was prepared for this. Whatever happened there, he was really prepared for this.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have to talk more about that another time. I appreciate it.
Another piece to this is that the idol worshiper seeks the meaning within the creation or within the natural environment, and then they superimpose the reality onto that thing, while the monotheist or the more Jewish perspective is that the meaning comes from without, and it's a calling on the person within creation.
Yeah. Definitely a calling. Yeah. Yes. And you got a thumbs up from Dr. Patterson, so you're golden.
Okay. I was just going to add on the video that you had mentioned.
So Ariel is going to talk about a video that he saw, and we're going to maybe post it, but go ahead and talk about it.
No, I saw a video this week. It was a tour of the Kotel tunnels that was given by a Knesset member to the guy, I forget his name, but he's the son of Hamas guy. And I just thought it was really fascinating, both from an archaeological standpoint for someone who was on the Kotel tunnel tours 20-something years ago to the amount they've excavated now. So anyone who's interested in that, it's really quite fascinating. But also this Arab, ex-Hamas guy, whatever, his message, I think, is very on point for a lot of things we've been discussing in this year, and how he really believes that, the Jews were really there in Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim. The Arabs have no legitimate claim to it. And he goes into it and talks about how even when I believe it's the Arabs had control of the area from 1948 to 1967, they were just not interested at all in doing any excavations. And I think just a lot of his message is on point. It's really fascinating to hear it really from someone who's coming from the other side. And so with permission, it's a link on a YouTube video. I think it was just posted this week, but I think it's just really fascinating and on point with a lot of the messages that everybody's been saying in the Shiur for the last months and longer.
Thank you so much, Ariel. Thank you, everyone. Have a great Shabbos. Great Shabbos, everyone.
Me too.
Good Shabbos, everyone.
Thank
Shabbos.
you all. Thank you all.
Don't forget, it's snowstorm in New York City, so don't be so
Yasher
happy.
Koacham.
I know you're happy, but I'm telling you, it's New York City snow.